All right, welcome everyone to indoor gardening activities for any classroom. I am Dinah Mack. I work for Mass Farm to School. I'm the education program manager. And if you're not familiar with Massachusetts Farm to School, we are a statewide organization that works to connect schools to farms and fisheries to promote healthy communities by increasing local food procurement in school. And we also work to increase food system education in the classroom. So we have a lot of ways you can get involved. We have a year-long professional learning institute for schools, for farm to school teams. We have a Harvest of the Month program for educators, elementary and secondary. There's a link on the end of the slide deck to join that. We have professional learning opportunities like this throughout the year, networking opportunities. We do policy work to increase funding for farm to school programming, and we have a newsletter. So if you are not familiar with us, please get on our newsletter. We do interesting things such as this. And I'm really excited for this workshop today with Heidi Ragno from West Springfield High School. I met Heidi when she did some curriculum writing for our Harvest of the Month program for secondary educators, and I'm really happy to have her back. If you, during this program at any time, have any questions, please put them in the chat. You can also put them in the Q&A. You can also raise your hand and we can pop you into the webinar if you want to talk. I can unmute you. Please feel free to take part in any way. And there'll be some time for questions and answers at the end. And we will send the slide deck to you with this video as well for you to use and to share with your colleagues. And at any time, if you want to introduce yourself also in the chat, then we'll know also who we're talking to. All right, Heidi.
Thank you. So I'm Heidi. I've been teaching, this is now my 13th year teaching. I started at South Hadley High School. I was there for 10 years, and then since I moved to West Springfield High School. And at West Springfield, that's when I met Dinah. So we, my school was, my colleagues were participating in the Harvest of the Month program, the Mass Farm to Food, and that's how I got involved with it. So I was on the committee of my school. Then I met Dinah. I said, oh, I'd love to get involved with the curriculum. So I would say Mass Farm to Food is an amazing resource. There's tons of lessons and webinars and these types of things. So it's an awesome organization. So my kids are 7 and 9. I like to be outside. I like to go, hiking, everything. And then that's my love of gardening. I think I brought maybe into the classroom and the science classes that I teach. So I think the plants and getting started growing in the classroom for me started with environmental science. Before teaching environmental science, I was back at my first school. I did environmental club, and now we call it the conservation club at my school now. But it's just been a nice way to get to know students outside of just the classroom setting. So I just find you give them a little job with plants and they take it over. They love it. I mean, it's very therapeutic. So tonight I would like to know if you have certain goals for you personally, because I'm going to try to make it a little bit for everyone depending on everyone's situation. Every school is very different, and I understand that. So challenges, everyone has different challenges, but I would like to know if you have certain obstacles that you are coming here for. Maybe you thought if I sign up for this webinar, I can get tips. Because I think schools, a lot of times it's funding, how do you get the resources for what you want to do? Space, do you have availability outside? And time. I think time is just of course, in curriculum, maybe you don't really have time to spend as much time on this project as you want. So tonight I have some ideas from just simple germination labs. So just getting students to see what plants are about, because I think, unfortunately, at least for me at the high school level, sometimes there's not as much of an emphasis on plant biology. It's a lot more focused on anatomy and human biology, but students just don't know as much about plants and those simple little miracles of life. Like I say, it's a good lesson for them. So I do have some little labs. I have a couple lessons embedded that you could take with you. Some ideas for getting started gardening, which could be within the classroom, and how you can transition that out to, your own use. Then ideas to save space, get supplies, ideas for basically those project-based learning through gardening. I have many ideas for that. And I've gone through many, many workshops over the years as well. So at the end, then if you can remind me, I didn't put this in the slides, but at the end, I'd love to talk about the Harvard Forest and like tree project and some things you could do even out in the woods. So even if you don't have the time to do gardening, there's so many ways you can, have access to plants in your classroom and have it be really real for your students. So next slide, thank you. Yeah, so if you are listening here now and you are really wondering what you're going to learn tonight, I would love to have you just type a little bit in the chat, just a little bit about maybe what you teach, where do you teach, what level, I'm looking for. So what ages and grades are your students? How familiar are you with gardening in the classroom? If this is something you are doing a lot that you feel is something you already incorporate, I'd love to know that. If you are totally new to gardening or growing plants, and maybe that's a scary process for you, let me know. And what are your goals? Because I think, unfortunately, there's just a lot of ways you can go with this, and it can be overwhelming. So, what is your personal goal? Is it just to get some supplies so your students can try this? Is it to actually get them growing a plant and maybe seeing it through from seed to adult plant? What are the challenges you face? So I, like this picture on the left is a nice picture. If you go back there, that's my picture from my ledge from my classroom that I'm currently in. So I just love this space because I have a nice window where there's a ton of sun. So even in the winter, this is, pretty much winter time. But that plant on the left, maybe this is March, April, but the pot on the left, that's actually carrots. So just to show you, you can actually grow anything, anywhere. So we started them from seed. They started to sprout. Those are the carrot shoots there. And underneath, the carrots are, I mean, you don't want your plants to be crowded. So it's not the best ideal situation. But for me, I'm not growing to actually harvest. I'm growing so they can see, oh, this is how a plant grows. This is actually where carrot comes from. I mean, I can't tell you that I've actually had high school students still to this day, every year we grow something and we pull it out from the soil. Oh, I didn't know potatoes came from the dirt. I mean, I didn't know like carrots. Really? That's how a carrot grows? So, with your own little kids, you might take them out to go picking, apples, things like that. But some of your students really haven't had access to that before. So that is just my little example of why I was doing that. So they come in and over a couple of weeks, like, oh, look at your plants, it's growing. And I said, well, like, do you remember when we planted the seed? And, you can pull it out and show them. And then I have the amaryllis there just to show that even the amaryllis bulb that they sell at Costco, which, again, this is your own resources, which sometimes is frustrating. But if you even just buy some things that you yourself would like to have, that can be a lab in itself. So you take the bulb that's already, it's got already enough the water in it. You don't need to water it or anything. You just let it sit. The amaryllis, like the Christmas bloom, and as they grow so fast that every day that could be a measurement lab. So you could use data in the classroom with the plant that you've already, that's pretty easy to maintain. So you could also do something that's not, if you're worried about maybe the plants not doing so well. There's just two different, for me, simple options, and then it's something nice the students can see as well. Or maybe they get more buy-in because they've seen you start it a little bit. It's a little experiment, and then maybe later on to that. Awesome. So Natalie has 3rd, 5th graders. Awesome. Yes, this is perfect. I actually was thinking as well. A lot of this is going to be outside the garden, so that's good. So next slide.
We have a shy chat using group because there's a bunch of people here, but thanks, Natalie, for sharing. If anyone else wants to share with Heidi, that's great. But otherwise, we'll move on.
Yeah, so anytime you can shout out anything, any questions that I can clarify. So this is my first slide because I thought this is the indoor gardening, limited space, when you really have a ton of options for yourself. So this is the roots and shoots. Oh, one moment. Here we go. There you go. Go ahead. Oh, hold on. There you go. Okay. Sorry, my son is just In the background. Okay, so roots and shoots. This was actually from a professional development I went to years ago, and I love this. I use this all the time. It's very easy to use from elementary up to high school. So I call this like roots and shoots labs. So waking up seeds. So basically the question is, do students even know how seeds germinate? And a lot of people don't know this, but the seeds in the very beginning really just need some water, you know, and a little bit of heat. They don't need a lot. So just to get the seeds to wake up, to start growing roots, and to maybe start just putting out a few little shoots. That's something you could do with a petri dish, paper towel. So I like this picture here just to show you, you know, just that germination process is a lesson in itself. So if you are feeling like you want to show them some things about a plant, you don't have the space to go outside, you don't have soil, you have limited resources, you don't feel like spending money, how are you going to do it? Petri dish. The other one that's really fun is if you just do a baggie. And actually, elementary school, this is very fun. You take a plastic bag, and you can put the paper towel just to keep the water in it. And so that seeds have something to kind of stay on. But radish seeds are amazing. If you put some radish seeds, I had a colleague once who would do it as a like root races. So you make anything a race and they'd love it. So the kids would literally measure every day how far the roots are growing. So this is just an example of just from germination to the roots and shoots growing. And in this example here, these are peas. But I think radish are probably the easiest, simplest. And if you actually get it germinated, then you can go and plant it. You could plant it in soil later. But for even this this type of lab, I would say it's okay if you just let it start with the roots. You don't need to plant it later on. It's okay if it dies. It's okay if you don't plant it. But it helps the students see what seeds actually are, you know, and how do you wake up the seeds? How do you get them to germinate? What happens when they germinate? And they can do a lot of measurements from it. So it's a pretty simple way of starting off. I think this is, like I said, I like these a lot because it's a very simple activity. If you are not sure, grass also is a good one. I've had students do. This is at the high school level, but you could adapt this for any grade. In environmental science, we do what's the effect of pollutants, and you can have the students design their own lab. You can have them think of, whoa, what would happen if, you know, you talk about oil spills, you talk about the effect of acid rain, things like that. They can come up with their own condition, put some grass seeds, put the paper towel in water. You can have your regular control, nothing's, you know, affected, and then you can add some variables and you can see what is the effect of that on the germination rate. So that's a way of showing that plants can be affected very simply. Grass grows very, very simple. So I've used grass seed, beans, of course, peas and corn, because these are all accessible, very, very inexpensive, and they usually, I don't want to say without fail, but usually without fail, they work pretty well. So if you're looking just to get something going, just so students can see something and have real results, because I hate to say, but the problem with growing things sometimes is if they don't see the results, and especially if it takes too long. You know, I was just planting, actually, I think it was broccoli the other day, and the seeds take a little while for them to actually sprout. So it's a process. So you have to be a little bit more patient. And at my level, the students can be a little bit more patient. But if you're working with younger kids, it might be better to just put some radish seeds, baggie, close it up. You can put them in groups. You can have them all try different conditions. So what's really fun is actually you could show like the phototropism. So I've had one teacher I know would have them stick them, you know, just tape the bag right up onto the windows, so you could see how when they start to sprout, they'll actually grow up towards the light. Or you could have maybe one condition maybe in a drawer in a darker space. You can have it in a warmer space or colder spaces. So you can do really a lot of fun things with it. And I think on the next slide I have the example of the lesson I have. And if it's not embedded in the slideshow, we can send it out there too. So I have a whole lesson for this. So what do you need to get started, and some of the things that you should think about if you're really wanting to garden in the classroom? I say seeds of your choice, but I would definitely go with something you know will grow pretty rapidly, so that the students can see that. It's up to you what your goal is, right? If you're trying to harvest something that they can eat, like in this picture, you know, maybe you really do want to grow tomatoes so they can see that through, but you do have to think about timing. Will you be able to have enough time to actually start the seeds and see the harvest and be there for the harvest? The harvest isn't coming until July. That's something to really plan out. So you could use soil containers. I use the flat trays. And I also use the, like the Olivia salad containers. I honestly, amazing. You bring those to school and it's just got the plastic. They're perfect because it's just plastic container, but then it has a plastic lid. So you can just poke a few holes and you can keep it shut when you first get it going. So it keeps the moisture in, keeps it insulated. If you leave it shut forever, it'll start getting moldy. You don't want that, but just prop it open a little bit, or you can at least let out a little bit of air. The windowsill, of course, is helpful, and I think most classes have access to that. But I understand classrooms are all different. I'm lucky now that mine has good sunlight. Some classrooms do not. I've been in many different classes over the years, just even in my own school. I've been in classrooms that were not set up to be science classrooms, so I understand there can be some problems and drawbacks there. So I would say if you're starting seeds indoors, you definitely want a heat mat or a heat lamp just to help keep the plants warm so that they're happily germinating. And then that will work until they sprout. And then once they sprout, they definitely need the sunlight. But those are some things that you need just for basic setup. So just back to, this is kind of what I already talked about, but these are some of the lessons that I have used, and we'll make sure we get these out to you. But the Waking Up Seeds Lab is very fun. Like I said, it's really just to teach how seeds germinate. And again, doesn't take long. Students start to see results pretty quickly. Put them in a petri dish, seeds in a petri dish, or seeds in a baggie. It's nothing too crazy. So if you do not have a lot of funding at your school, this would be, for me, I think this is just the one I've always had access to no matter where I was teaching. And then do the pollutants affect seed germination. For me, that was a good one in environmental science. And you can get students to be creative with it. You can have them test different conditions. You can ask them, what does a plant need? Oh, they need sunlight. Well, do they need sunlight at first? When is it that they need the sunlight? So all of these are very fun. And the root races lab, the second you get competition, and I think they have a lot of fun. So I've seen that adapted for mostly the root races. It's very good for middle school. So my colleagues at the middle school they do this one mostly because I think it's a lot of fun for their students. So then beyond seeds, if you want to actually get into the gardening and maybe into a harvest, of course, gardening can teach your students so many things. So I would say the first thing you need to do is decide what is it that you want them to learn from it, especially what level you're at. Because if you want to do this with the younger kids, maybe elementary level, there's a lot on your end you will have to be managing because there's only so much they can manage. Once they plant it, they're going to be disappointed if it doesn't grow. And so you really have to make sure that you're taking care of things like the watering. What happens if there's, now we don't have to worry about snow days, but if there's a day off or if there's a long weekend, April break might be coming up, or one of your, long breaks are coming up. So these are some things that just have to be managed. At least at my school, I always try to plan that someone who's around will help me with my watering, because that's just one of those things that will be annoying to you if you don't have it planned out, or if you're about to leave on vacation and then you come back. And I have had that happen years ago. We were working on the fast plants, which is an AP bio lab. So we had these genetically modified seeds they had to grow, and it was very cool because they were growing from seed to, it was 8 weeks to harvest. So they're called fast plants because in just the 2 months you'd see it. But we were about to go on break, and I thought it was okay to leave my system the way it was. It seemed okay, but it wasn't. So we came back and they had died. So just something to think about. It's really important. So do you want them to see the full life cycle of a plant? Do you want them to understand the interconnectedness of our environment, or where our food comes from? That's the harvest part, which is important. All of these are important. But remember, a lot of these things are going to be hard to do, all of it. So you kind of got to pick what you think is important. In this picture, I really like this because lettuce and microgreens are also, to me, if you're going to garden, if you've not done it yet before in the classroom, microgreens are very easy. You can sprinkle them on dirt, you water them, they start to sprout pretty quickly. And I would say within a couple weeks, you can get enough of a harvest that the students could at least get a little leaf to say, oh, okay, now I understand what lettuce, or how this grows. Lettuce is also, I would say, one of those crops that's easy to grow, easy to harvest. Once you get into things like the root vegetables like the carrots. I had that as my demonstration in the beginning, but it does take a commitment to time for some of these plants. So if you're gardening in the classroom, some kind of garden enclosure, like in this picture, it's a flat tray, like one of the Jiffy trays that has the soil. And these are staked down just to hold in the plastic tents there, because that's what I mean about you have to make sure that keeps in and insulates. Maybe you have to make sure that it's warm depending on the temperature of your classroom. I know sometimes you never even know what the temperature is going to be of your classroom. It might be all over the place. So keeping the temperature consistent and water consistent for the plants is very important. And so just prepare a plan for watering. I'm lucky at the school now that I'm at that we work with the Mass Farm to Food very well, and so I have a teacher that does basically the life skills teacher does a ton of planting, and then I help with it, so we sort of help each other out. But there's two of us to monitor, so maybe if you could find even someone else at your school to help you with this process, just in case maybe you're absent on a day you didn't think you were going to be and it needs to get watered. It's nice to have someone to help out and to know what it is you're working towards. So again, just thinking, what do you want to plant? Is it something that will be long-term that you can harvest in the fall? My school last year, some of the kids from another class decided they really wanted to plant the pumpkins to be harvested in the fall. So we did have a program over the summer that would help with the watering for that, but that's, that was a commitment. And our students were old enough to make that commitment to it. But is it something that you want to sprout slowly, quickly? Do you have a place to put the plants outside once they're ready? So maybe you just want to start the seeds. You could start so many seeds inside and just transplant them, but do you have a place to put them? Do you have somebody who maybe wants to take care of them or to transplant them after that? So again, I love microgreens. Any kind of herbs, lettuce are very good to start with. Very good for the students to see. They can see it, the full life cycle of those plants, and not a problem. Some of the other plants are going to take a little bit more of a commitment. But radishes, again, if you start radishes and do some of those root race labs, maybe around this time of year, by the time you get them planted, maybe inside the classroom, if you want to go and transplant them into a garden later on. I have grown radishes in the classroom, and that's cool too. You pull it right out of the ground, and it's something. Students are not familiar with radishes. Again, they just don't really eat them. So when they see them, at least they can, they see the whole picture of the plant, which is very cool. So there's a lot of different ways there to do this. I would also recommend, if you're thinking about different plants, to just think about where you're getting your supplies. So this is I'll try to revisit this topic, but I know one of the questions for teachers, again, it's time, resources, and space. So I'm trying to address the space issue, but resources is an issue. Do you have your own money to spend on seeds? So I've done it a lot of different ways. I have spent my own money on seeds. I have spent my own money on soil. But then Mass Farm to Food really does help a lot. There's a lot of grants out there. Smithland pet stores have grants, and I don't know if you have local like pet and garden centers. A lot of garden centers are very, very helpful for teachers. So I've gone into these stores and explained my situation and what I'm trying to do, and they're usually helpful with the cost for some of these supplies. So it's really, there's so many resources out there, and your local garden clubs are also, and I'll try to revisit this topic later too, but while it's on my mind, the local garden clubs are amazing. So my town's garden club, I joined, and they just are, trying to garden as adults. They're just into it. But once I met them, and then I met some of these people, they have extra seeds. They have extra things that they're trying to do and give away. So it's kind of amazing for that. The other thing is, if you do want to do a garden, or if you want to grow these plants so your students have this ability to see it. The other really, really cool thing that you can do, and my school does this, I can't say I'm the lead on this because I'm not teaching this class anymore, but I don't know if you met Amy there at West Springfield, but she's amazing. And so she and her students set up where they start the seedlings, and then they do a seedling garden sale. So a lot of high schools, I think, do this now, but it's become this amazing full cycle thing, because what they do is they do that as a fundraiser. So they sell all the seedlings, you know, different plants, different vegetables, you know, and teachers will buy them. I mean, I think they sell out, like, we don't even have enough time to buy them. She just sends us all an email, and like everyone's there that day to buy all the seedlings. And I think, you know, they make a few $100s at the end of it, but that fuels their budget for the seeds and soil for next year. So there's a lot of ways you can go with gardening and soil, environmental. So just wanted to say, don't feel like, oh, this sounds great, but I have to, you know, where am I going to get the budget or anything like that? Because there are a lot of resources out there. So yeah, so what to do when the plants get bigger. So this is just an example of, you know, you have this maybe seed starter trays. And so I really like the seed starter trays. And like I said, I love the salad containers with plastic lids. Personally, I like the salad containers with plastic lids because then for me in my classroom, it's helpful in groups, because then I can give them out to my students and they can work in smaller groups rather than having one big tray that we're all like crowding around. And basic soil is fine. And you know, you really don't need much else, but you do need to have a plan for when they start to get crowded and they need to get transplanted. Once the roots are growing through, that's when you know it's time to transplant. You can move them back into bigger containers, so you can do some container gardening. And for those people who are wondering what you're going to do, I would say container gardening is probably the best situation, because you know, then you can just take them right home, you can move them around, and you can, you know, not worry if you don't have a place to actually plant them at your school outside. But if you want to do gardening outside, I do think talk to your school administrators, because they probably will like to help you out if possible. So be creative. So I often bring in plants like from my own garden. So for example, these are marigold seeds, and this was a lesson in itself, because I think you can see in the picture, it's like a dried up shriveled plant. So marigold will, you know, go right to seed once it starts to die, and you start, you know, you see all of those little black seeds in the middle. There's so many of them. So I bring that in. My students kind of laugh. They say, "Oh, you have a dead plant." So in September, they're like, "This is a dead plant," and I love that lesson, because then I say, well, what happens when plant dies? Well, now it's already seeded, right? It's been outside, it's got pollinated, it's ready to seed again. So we harvest them, you know, you can show them what the seeds look like. You know, label, put in a container, and now you have seeds for your next year. So this is now how I do a lot of my harvesting and planting for the next year. You know, you get to a point in gardening where if you hopefully collect the seeds well, you don't always have to buy, you know, everything. Of course, you want to probably supplement for some of the annuals, but you know, you can collect, like in this case, the marigold seeds. And I've done this with a few other plants. Like once the tomato or cucumber, once like all those plants are ready to almost rot, like you can't eat it anymore, at least the seeds are good, and you can usually use those for the next year. So now this is kind of like the life cycle. It's kind of full circle. So you can start with that, and then later on, you know, that's what will work out. So decide what you want to do. It's all an experiment. I would say, you know, there's a lot of different ways to do this. You can show your students how to start seeds, how to do the germination, how to grow the seeds from, you know, seed to full plant, how you can harvest maybe from the fruit from the plant. And the full lifespan of plants means you might not be able to harvest till the fall. So just know that if you're planting something now, if you don't have the space of the summer to take care of it, or anybody at the school to take care of it, that might be hard. The other thing about school space is the gardening itself, annual gardening and harvesting plants, maybe tomato or things like that. That is a very hard undertaking, because again, you have to have the space to do that, maybe a raised garden bed, which in itself could be an event, but it might be hard to convince your school of that. But one thing I would say that I would definitely suggest, I've done this actually at both schools I worked at, is doing a perennial garden. And so that's a really fun undertaking. It's a way of make a day of it, make a couple days of it, but then it could be not to say it's one and done, but it's not as long of a commitment as growing seeds that are going to be put in a garden. So I love the perennial garden because it is something that's given back to the school, you know, maybe beautifying a place, a space around you. So for example, my school now has some woods in the back, and we have a shed that they had to remove a building, kind of like put, it was basically a point where the building had this full big brown, kind of just like almost brown sand next to it, really wasn't beautiful anymore to have grass wouldn't even grow there. And so we had gotten approval to create a perennial garden. And so we dug up the soil, put new soil in, and planted some perennials. I actually love the perennial garden because it's something that's self-sustaining after that, and most perennials that you get native to your climate are just gonna take off. And where would you get those? That's where I would recommend, you know, maybe you have some plants in your own yard that you would take. I have like a mint that grows crazy. It just spreads every year. So I would dig that up and I put that there. And I had, again, access to a local garden club where when I was just at a meeting one day talking to some people, you know, they said, oh, I have all this, I have all these irises I'm digging up, or all these hostas I'm digging up, all these, you know, different plants that they really loved, but they didn't need anymore because they were taking over and they were trying to replace. So I do think that's the benefit of having a space that you can really, you know, make it your own, and eventually you can build on it. And if the school sees a space that you're beautifying, usually they're pretty good with that, especially when it's not something as committed as a tree. If you want to do a tree planting, you usually need a little bit more approval because that's such a commitment, you know, have planted a tree. But if you plant a perennial garden, I think usually that's, I've always had success with those. And like I said, I'm excited to see how last year's planting went for, you know, what we planted last year. My school before that, we had a spot in our courtyard, we planted raspberries and blueberries. So if you think of perennials that are giving you a crop that is still teaching students, you know, raspberries and blueberries are amazing in themselves. And my school also has a couple fruit trees that were planted before I was there, but now it's just an amazing lesson, right? Because now we have a couple apple trees that now we can go out and actually learn from. And again, I don't think, at least for me, when I'm teaching these topics in my class, it's not so much about how much we harvest, but it's about understanding the process and what they can learn from that. And data collection too, you know, how what works well, what doesn't. Just the experimenting is a lot of fun. Yeah, so the hydroponic system, the picture I put here, the hydrodome, that's just because, again, I do just want to say, even if you don't have any, you know, maybe you don't feel like you have access to some of these things, just you can get so creative. My school from, I think it was the Mass Farm too, we have a tower, which is amazing. And the tower is amazing because it's filled with, you know, the nutrients that you need for hydroponics. But that's an amazing system because the tower, we were able to grow basil in it last year, and it took it away from needing any soil at all. And it's a really sustaining system. So if you do get a chance to learn about hydroponics, this one is just a little, you know, it's like a kid's one, but even just that in itself is really, really great for students to learn. Okay, if you are using hydroponics, what is it that the plant still needs, and how do you make sure the nutrients are, you know, working for the plants. Lettuce, again, is pretty easy, but I do just want you to think about how you can be creative in your space, whatever that's going to look like for you. If you want to take it outside, if you want to spend just a few days with it, if this is something you want to do on a weekly basis, you know, who are the students you're going to work with, and what time do you have to put into this is all something to think about, and it is going to depend on who you are. So these are just some examples. So this is really, again, I think Mass Farm to School just has helped with a lot of these things. So I wouldn't, I would just suggest, you know, ask around and try to apply for everything you see. So the hydroponic system, this is the example I was showing, or just talking about. So the hydroponic tower is amazing, and as long as you move it where there's sunlight, you know, just a window. But you don't need, I mean, you can see in this this room itself is right next to another part of our building. So it doesn't have maybe the best sunlight, but it works really well. And so that's just showing how I worked with my students to do that. The picture in the middle is we have a greenhouse space, which now the greenhouse was funded through a grant. And so the hydroponic tower, if you see in the middle picture, I don't know if you can see on my arrow here, but the middle picture, that big tower, we actually had squash and cucumbers growing in that was from one of those hydroponic systems. So you can see it can actually hold and support pretty much a full garden there. And then these were some of the trays of seedlings that we had started. There's a lot of different ways to keep the plants going. So there's some beans in there, some cucumber trellises. So we pretty much had everything in this greenhouse space. And then as the seedlings grew, that's when we would do the seedling sales, because most of it we couldn't plant at our school. There was one area we did plant. So the last picture here is just a build day when we did build raised beds. And so we did end up having a few cucumbers, a few tomatoes, but we didn't plant everything that we started from seed because we just didn't have the space for that. And again, watering, we had to, make sure that was taken care of through the summer. So these are just some ideas of ways that you can get involved, and you can definitely get the supplies you need if you ask and can find the funding for it. Don't be shy though, because there's so much out there, and I hope that this is inspiring for you to keep trying things. So these are just some advice, depending on where you are. So I would say just always start small. If you've not done this yet before, anything that you do with your students is new to them, even if they say, oh, I've seen this before. Science is always uncovering layers, and every time you grow anything, you're learning from that process. So I do think it's all worth doing. No matter how simple, even if it's just some seeds in a bag that germinate, that's a lesson in itself. That's something interesting. It's something hands-on. It's something different. And you can definitely try incorporating this. Some people, at least at the high school level, but probably elementary and middle too, I find a lot of colleagues, teachers will say it's very hard to incorporate this into curriculum because I just don't have time. I don't have time to stop this unit so that I can grow some plants. That can be hard to find the time. So I would say try to find units or curriculum that you're already using and teaching and just incorporate it with plants. So even the beginning of the year, beginning of school year, when you teach scientific method or parts of a lab experiment, you can definitely use seeds. You can use germination. You can start some plants. You can have them do, the seeds at home at school and have them take them home. You can do this in a lot of different ways. And so definitely try something you already have access to. So for example, if you like gardening and you already have some things at home, just bring them in and show what you've already been familiar to. Don't maybe, you can experiment with it too. And that you can just tell your students you're trying something new yourself. And I think that's also a lesson for them that, I don't know if this is gonna be perfect. I don't know if it's gonna work, but we're gonna try it. But definitely start with simple, easy, low cost materials. Try your own experiments. You could try it as little demos. You could just say, oh, I'm gonna try this in the window for, a week and see if it goes well, then, I'll use it in class. But just try it because you really don't know if it's possible until you do it. I've seen a lot of different classrooms that don't have great lighting that ended up being, we found space for them to at least have some seeds growing. We actually had one of my colleagues way back, my first school had a classroom that was on the inside of the school. It had basically no windows to the outdoors. So I thought this is crazy. But he got the heat pads and the heat lamps, and so he was able to start the seeds, and then he did have to move them out after that. But the ability is just like, you can really do a lot that you might think you don't have the space or the capacity, but we probably can make it work. And if you're passionate about getting equipment or trying something new, the hydroponic systems, those towers are really cool. And they're very easy. Once you set up the towers and you put in the nutrients, you know, you can let them sit and they take care of the plants a little bit better than just having them in soil that you have to water constantly. So definitely apply for the grants that are out there. You can raise funds through clubs, and you can ask your administration. They might have a budget for something that they will get creative with. They know if it is important to them, and a lot of them will support the projects that involve students. So again, like just a beautifying day where you go out and plant some perennials. These are all just things that are worth doing. And even if you're starting with, okay, we're gonna plant even some bulbs outside, you know, like just some daffodils and tulips for the next year, that is a lesson for the students too. And so I would say be sure to plan something that can create lasting impact, or something that can be done, you know, every year that kind of will go, you know, through. But I just wouldn't recommend planting a garden that's just going to die in the summer unless you have a way of taking care of it. Or like I said, you start the seeds, sell the seedlings, now you have money to do that next year. And now someone else can take the seedlings home and start their own garden. That's kind of the way, at least at my school, that's what we do, because it just makes sense. Then those people take the plants and it's less that we have to manage through the summer. Definitely, I would say a perennial garden using your own native plants. It's just a no-brainer because those plants will thrive and they're way low maintenance, which is amazing. The other, yeah, like I said, raspberries, blueberries, you know, hopefully that is a lesson itself and it will just keep growing to the next years. And again, like I said, our school groups plant seeds in the spring, sell seedlings as a fundraiser. The students, you know, get the experience planting, growing. Some of them want to take them home, so if they want to go take them home but plant their own garden, that's great. I'm sure you'll have students too that will say, oh my God, I planted this, I see it growing, I want to take it and I want to go and take care of it. So there's just so many ways to incorporate it. And I think if you maybe even ask the families, you know, what they're interested in, I don't know. You know, I don't know how many students have the capacity to take it home and take care of it, but maybe they can, or maybe you can come up with a way of helping them with that. So there's just so many ways to do it. And I would say the more creative you get, the better, just for your situation. Every classroom is, you know, unique to your situation. So I would just definitely make sure that you only bite off as much as you can chew, because if you go crazy, then, you know, I had years, like I said, where I've done a little too much, and then, you know, maybe you aren't able to maintain it, or you can't keep it going for the next year because it was too much. So don't waste your own, you know, too much time and resources, but really try to find ways to incorporate it.
Hey Heidi, you had asked me to remind you to talk about a forest.
Oh yes, that's the next one. Okay, so I've done a lot of really cool workshops, and so one of them, and I'm bringing this up because it's not particularly for this topic, but I think it really applies. So Harvard Forest is who I did this workshop through. So if anyone's interested in any forest studies or anything with the getting outside into the woods, the Harvard Forest is amazing, because basically what they do is they help to train us, you know, teachers, how to collect data, how to get your students out and collecting data. So we actually would go out into our woods that was around, you know, behind our school, and we would create a big plot, like 10 by 10 meters, and we would measure the trees that were there. We'd actually measure, you know, the breath height, and it was amazing, because what happened was Harvard Forest was very cool, because we actually would measure the trees, we would upload it to their database, and then the idea was that annually we would do that with our students. So we could not measure the growth rate of those trees based on their species over the years. So that was at the high school level, that's what we did, and it was really amazing. But the reason I was bringing that up is I was thinking about, when I was presenting this, I was thinking that even if it's really just hard for you to start the seeds, to grow the seeds, to get the supplies, even if this feels like very overwhelming, there's so many ways to get your students out and doing work with plants. So there's just so many things. So the biodiversity studies I think are really cool. I mean, you can take a plot, like a hula hoop plot, and have them looking down, counting, the number of species they see. You can get them out into the forest and measuring the trees, or trying to identify the plants. So I've had students go out and try to identify the trees, the species, and then you can look it up. There's places online you can see, well, how much carving might take a strawberry every year. What's the estimate of how much they're taking in. You can go out and try to show them. What I love about trees is if you go out in the spring, fall, winter, you can show how to identify trees when they have their leaves. You can show them how to identify when they have just the bud scars, when they have no leaves. You can do a lot with forests around you. So if getting outside is your goal, if getting the students engaged in nature is your goal, then there's so many ways to do that as well. So I just wanted to bring that in because I think gardening itself is a specific topic, but I think that if you look back wider, I think many of us have a bigger goal, which is just to really get our students engaged in what they're eating, what they're doing outside, how they're taking care of the planet. I think there's just so many ways that this is all integrated. So if you have any outdoor space around you, just think about how you can maybe get outside and try to take advantage of that. Because even in the fall is great weather, and people don't think about gardening in fall, but there's a lot of great things you can do in many times of the year with your students to show change over time, to show adaptations of plants and animals, and just a lot out there. So I just wanted to bring that up. But Harvard Forest is where I went, and if you are interested, they have really cool workshops there.
Great, thanks. So I just put a note for anyone to, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and Heidi can answer them. And you'll get the slide deck, but if you're interested in staying up to date with webinars and professional learning opportunities, our School Institute, please subscribe to our newsletter. We also have a Harvest of the Month for Educator program, which is Heidi wrote some of the secondary curriculum for that program. It is a monthly program where every month we feature a crop, and elementary or secondary teachers get a newsletter based on whatever level you sign up for. And the newsletter has crop history, curriculum, it has a garden activity, it has something you can do in your classroom that is an easy lift, an idea of the month, and an event calendar and news from the farm to school world, and also book suggestions to build your libraries, classroom or school libraries. And that's a free program. So please consider signing up for that. And we also have an institute once a year, which is a professional learning. It's a year-long professional learning institute for farm to school teams. So if you are at a place in your school where you have a team which needs to be made up of the food service director, a classroom teacher, an administrator, and someone else, you go on a retreat and you get paired with a coach, and the coach helps your team create an action plan for your farm to school vision. And you then spend a year with your coach rolling out that plan and also setting future goals. So our application just was dropped for that. So if that interests you, please check that out. And yeah, so any questions? I don't see any questions in the chat. So I think, Heidi, is there anything else that you want to share to close us out?
I would just say if anyone has any questions, just feel free to email me anytime. I have lots of lessons and written up lessons. So, if there's anything that I spoke to and you just want a copy of, I have a lot of different ideas. But Mass Farm to School has so much. So definitely just, keep, you're good to just keep following, because I think honestly there's so much. I learned a ton from the educators that I've worked with through it. So it's an awesome organization. So thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. And if anyone on this call is interested in presenting, we're always looking for more educators and people who really have lived experience with students who want to present a passion. So if there's something that you're really passionate about in farm to school, inside, outside gardens, hydroponics, vermicomposting, food system, food justice, climate activism, like anything related to farm to school, please reach out to me. I'm the education program manager, so I'm always looking to amplify those stories from classrooms and get teachers connected, so that you can all learn from each other. So please get in touch. And thanks, Heidi. And thanks everyone for coming, and stay in touch with us.
Thank you.
Who was that? Is that somebody you know?
Yeah. It's fine. He was busy, but